everything they eat, for every 100 pounds of hay they eat, they put 45 pounds of natural fertilizer back out on your property.
Right.
And that fertilizes their trees, you know. And they haven't looked at it from that side. You know, it's like, well, they may step on a tree or accidentally pull a little seedling up, you know. But really, they've made millions and millions off of it all these years since Derek's first bought it. And Derek sold to Weyerhaeuser, and Derek's called themselves Choctaw Lumber Company. But they were the ones that ended up, I think, acquiring some of the land under false pretenses. There was over 61 or 2,000 acres, about 62,000 acres that affected 400 and something families. You know, that they took out of this country, and it's.
Well, are they? How much land does Weyerhaeuser own, or are they scaling back?
Actually, Weyerhaeuser doesn't have a whole lot of holdings right here now, I don't think, in this county. They still have more in McCurtain County and Arkansas, you know, back that way, and maybe some in LaFleur counties. And they've got some in a little bit in Texas, like Red River counties, I think, over in that area, you know. But a few years ago, up until like 1990, they had probably, I think, about 1.5 million acres.
Yeah.
Here, and then they sold out 215,000 acres to John Hancock, and John Hancock investors, and they continued leasing to us up until they sold to an outfit called Barrow and Heath, part of their holdings, and that my lease was under that Barrow and Heath out of Longview, Texas, and they were energy people, and they continued leasing to us, and then Barrow and Heath sold to a deal called Mopus, which was a Mississippi-based timber management group, and they formed another corporation called Oklahoma Land and Timber, and they're the ones that, in July of '07, they notified us by letter that they had bought the land. And they thanked us for being good stewards of the land. Or the former owners had said we'd been good stewards of the land, and if we wanted to continue doing business as usual, to sign this paper and send it back. Well, that was in July of '07. Signed it, sent it back, and then in September of that same, just 2 months later, we get another letter saying that they had decided to manage their land for intensive forestry production, and unfortunately grazing animals didn't fit into that picture. So my lease that I was paid for at that time would be up in February 28th of '08, and they said at that time they wanted me to have all the horses off of their land and all my pens and troughs and everything, you know. And I told the people in charge at that time, a guy named Keith Williams, that it was impossible for us to get that many horses off of that land in that length of time. And if I did get them all off at once, I wouldn't have any place to go with that many of the horses, because they did just like the Choctaw people did. They came here and they fended for themselves. Everybody thought they would die out and starve to death, and they didn't. They made it, you know. They found a way to hunt and fish and grow their own corn and do whatever they needed to do to survive. And these horses done the same thing in the mountains. And anyway, what was it you asked me there?
Well, we started with Weyerhaeuser, and you gave me an excellent rundown of how it came to be that you got kicked off Blackjack Mountain.
Okay, yeah. I told them it'd be impossible for us to get them, so we started. We had been told in years past that the horses had a disease called equine infectious anemia, and so the the ASPCA and the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals and the American Livestock Breeds Conservancy out of Pottsboro, North Carolina. They wanted to assure that if they found any positive horses for that disease, that we had a quarantine pasture to put them in, that they wouldn't just kill them, you know. Yeah. And so they started testing the horses as we'd catch them, and to prove that they wasn't checking the same horses twice, you know, they put a microchip in each one of them, which we wasn't in favor of the microchips, but it proved to be a help to me, and it really helped me in the federal court case, because in later years they were saying we tested the same animal several times and claimed it was 600 and something horses, but the state of Oklahoma and the state animal health department said no, we tested 673 different horses for him. Great. Not a one of them showed any sickness at all of any kind.
How did that get started? Do you know?
Yeah, it got started a few years before that, and this is what I was worried about on this. It's my opinion, and it wouldn't help our cause any for me to say what I think. But
okay.
but it's the same thing that they do with the feral hogs now.
Yeah.
They say they carry disease, they destroy the land and all that. Well, they're saying the same. They were saying that about the horses. They carry a disease, which they didn't. It's proved later that they didn't. And the ones that they said of mine, all my Choctaws that were sick and they had to be euthanized, I wouldn't euthanize them. I got a quarantine pasture and kept them in it. And I raised from September of '95 to June of '01, they kept me under quarantine with these horses.
Wow.
Now, how do
Someone
you feed?
would have died.
how do you feed? You know, to keep from euthanizing them. I said, if I kill these horses, there will be not ever another Choctaw horse ever that we can say is an authentic Choctaw horse. Mm-hmm. And I had friends and neighbors that got upset at me because they said, "Man, what are those little horses good for anyway? They're just a plug. We'll give you some good quarter horse stock." Well, I said, "No, I don't want that. I had some of that. I don't want it. I want it. I know what's good. I know what's good, you know, because I've raised riding one of them, you know." And but anyway, I kept those horses, and in that length of time, I raised 126 negative babies. They say that what they were saying, and the reason it scared everybody, and the way they're justifying it, is they actually wanted to kill those horses. They wanted to get in a helicopter, like you do the feral hogs, and go through the mountains and play their games and see how many they could kill, you know. Mm-hmm. And they had the state agriculture department at that time going along with them on it, because they were making heavy donations to them.
Well, buy what you need.
And it ruined us financially, but we kept the horses. And like I say, I raised 126 negative babies. I can go out here and show you the horses that came out of those. These horses wouldn't be here. All those that was on the pond dam over there that was in Kansas, they wouldn't have been here. That's why I wouldn't leave them in Kansas. It goes too deep for me, you know. Yeah. My kids sacrificed all their years. I couldn't furnish them the vehicles that they wanted when they went to college and things like that, because it was all going in horse feed, you know, and I just couldn't let them be destroyed, put down, you know. And we raised all those babies. The state agriculture department had a whole different outlook by the time the deal was over, because we had a professor from Louisiana State University, Virginia Tech, Dr. Chuck Issel, that runs the Gluck Research Center, that gets as much as $1.4 million from the NIH, the National Institute of Health, because they were saying these horses had the same lentivirus as HIV. And so the National Institute of Health, therefore, would put a lot of money into that research. Well, they had them a little gold mine on the ground. They could travel, they could do anything they wanted to do all these years, buy facilities and fix it up however they wanted to, you know. And but they had to show a need for that. So they said, okay, Southeast Oklahoma has got a cesspool of disease up there. These little Choctaw horses, and they need to be destroyed. And like I say, people that knew me and respected me as an ag teacher and all, they'd say, Rickman, what's wrong with you? You know, if you got a rabid dog, you got to put it down. You got to do something with it. And I'd say, yeah, but these are not rabid dogs. You know, these are my best friends. You know,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't do that to one of my kids, and I'm not going to do it to one of my horses, and I'm not going to kill one of my dogs because he's sick. You know, and I don't think these are sick to start with. My argument was from the start that these horses did like the people. You know, a lot of your people died from cholera and everything in the world, diseases that was introduced into them on purpose. You know, to try to kill Native Americans out. You know, they give them bad blankets and all kinds of stuff, and the same thing was happening with the horses. They thought they was getting infection into these horses, but I kept telling them, these horses that survived in these mountains for 150, 200 years, these horses have a natural immunity to everything. We've got horses up there that was 25 years old that had never had any dewormer in their life, you know, never had not one kind of shot. Back in the 60s when they said all horses was going to die of sleeping sickness, Gilbert Jones was there. I didn't really know Gilbert at that time, but I know what happened in Choctaw County. I know what happened in Push County. Everybody that owned a horse brought their horses into the fairgrounds, and the state was there in vaccinating every horse for sleeping sickness, equine encephalitis, and or they was all going to die. Every horse in the United States was going to die. Well, Gilbert, he said, well, my little horses up here, they're not going to get a shot, and they're not going to die, you know, and they didn't. The ones in the mountains didn't, you know, and so I said, this equine infectious anemia thing, I said, your test for antibodies that fights against a disease. You know, that's what their test, the Coggins test, is a test for antibodies of EIA, of equine infectious anemia. People call it a Coggins test. I had Dr. Leroy Coggins that started this test in 1970, 2 or 3. I had him right here at Antlers. I had him at HUGO, and I had medical doctors in the deal and everything when I was fighting this deal, you know. And Dr. Leroy Coggins was on my side on it. And I mean, he understood exactly what I was saying. I said, these horses have natural antibodies. They had to develop their own antibodies to survive.
Right.
It's just like us when we went and got a smallpox shot, or vaccine, and they pricked that little deal, it made a sore there, you know, little, and you had that little scar on you forever, you know. Well, if you did a blood test of a person that had that, you'd find smallpox. You'd say, hey, this guy's got smallpox. He's fixing to give it to everybody in the world, you know. Well, no, he just got antibodies that fights the disease. And I said, these Choctaw horses have their own antibodies. Did you know, at the end of this deal, Dr. Carrie Floyd admitted to me, she was our state horse veterinarian at that time. She said, Brian, I'm convinced that you was right, that these horses were not ever going to die of the disease. At first, within 2 months, they was all going to be dead of it. I was a fool to be trying to get a quarantine pasture or something that nobody had a horse within a mile of it and all this kind of stuff, you know. And but after years of this and raising those negative babies and checking them, we checked all of my horses in this deal. We checked them every month for that many years. Every month we pulled blood out of them.
Wow.
Now I put my horses through a lot of stuff to keep them alive, you know, and their mamas and all of them. And that whole pasture down there where you said the horses were so personable to you.
Yes.
Those were all raised out of that. They all should have been dead. I mean, they shouldn't have never existed. Their mamas and daddies would have been dead. Going Streak's mama, Going Streak's daddy, all of them wouldn't have been here, so they wouldn't have been here. You know.
So they're passing on that immunity to their children and grandchildren.
No, nobody admits that, but yes, I think that's my personal belief, because we have not since they won in court that our horses had to be moved out of the mountains. Before this, if I took a horse into my vet and said, well, I'm going to send this horse to Hawaii, or I'm going to send it to Dallas, Texas, or send it to Kansas City, or wherever, you know. Newton, Kansas, we got a bunch up there. At least 1 or 2 out of 3 would show positive, you know. All right. Once we have the forced removal, just like the Choctaws were forced removed out of Mississippi, we have the forced removal of the horses a second time. Not Mississippi this time, there was one time, and now it was out of these mountains, their last stronghold, their last home, just right here, just joining us here, you know. And then not one of them was sick, not one. Before, 1 in every 3 would for sure be positive, and the whole bunch needed destroyed. But then, when the timber companies they sued me for $339,039 plus court costs and attorney fees, and because I didn't get them out soon enough.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But you know, you don't get them out soon. You know, how do you go trap all the deer out of the woods?
Right.
You know, these horses had learned to fend for themselves and protect themselves and make it on their own in those mountains, and you just can't go catch them all at once.
Yeah.
So I'd get 5 or 10 here, 20 over here. Then I'd call the state and they'd come and check them. They'd always be okay. I've got the spreadsheets of where we did that every time, and that's what won my deal in federal court, because they said I had effectively neglected the notification to remove my nuisance animals off of their land, and therefore destroying their property and depriving tourists good wholesome place to ride their 4-wheelers, because they'd hit manure piles on the road, the log roads, you know, with their 4-wheelers and stuff, you know, and so they couldn't lease their land for hunting because people didn't want horses out there get on their game cameras, you know. They wanted to just take a picture of a bear or a deer, and if a horse got in that, oh my God, you know, that ruined some of their film. That ruined some of their film, you know. And I say that horse is just as indigenous as anything out there, you know.
Right.
And I did a program for the 23rd Sovereignty Symposium of the Native Americans in Oklahoma City in April of 2010, and everybody there said that what I said about these horses and that deal. I mean, a lot of them, I talked to Cheyenne, the Arapaho people, and all that was there, and they said it was the best program that they had ever talked about, you know. And I was on the panel with Chief Powell, ex-Chief Kelly Haney of the Seminole Nation, and Madeline Pickens, and that was it. Yeah, there's 4 of us that was on the panel together, and it was monitored by a black judge from Sapulpa, a Supreme Court justice, you know, that kind of kept everybody on track and everything. You know, like y'all notice I get off track all the time, like I've done right here. So
that's okay.
I do that all the time.
Storyteller.
Yeah. One thing, there's so many things in my head. They run together, and I come back and forth. So you'll just have to ask me or get me back on.
We all do the exact same thing.
We do. Our conversation. We definitely do. Sidetrack.
But I say the horses are just as everything in them about their nature, their nervous system, their senses, everything is just as indigenous as the deer or the turkey or anything, you know. And they should be treated that way and with respect, you know. And but like I said, I raised 126 native babies out of those positive mamas that they wanted to destroy, but I had to put up. You know, I couldn't sell animals, so all the time before, my little Choctaw horses would pretty much feed the other horses.
Yeah.
But we went for 14 years. Me and my wife went for 14 years and never sold one female out of any of our Choctaw horses. Then we sold and gave away some of the little stud colts because we didn't need that many stallions, you know. Yeah. But we needed every female, and a lot of my mares. See, I had lots of horses that, like, I'd have 5 full sisters, you know, or more. And then when I started getting as many as 5 full sisters, then I would take 2 of them. I shouldn't say this, that I like least or whatever, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
I would take those two to the mountains. Then they became my favorite ones
Yeah.
because I was trying to reintroduce them back
Yeah.
into the original bands that their grandmothers and all come out of,
Mhm.
and I did that, and then they won my heart over. They just because of their spirit,
Yeah.
they went back to their old. They got their wild, but they still love me. They'd still come to me no matter where, you know. And Gilbert Jones, I'm the one that taught the horses, or basically me and his son-in-law taught the horses to eat and to come to my call, you know.
Mhm.
And I could call them for a long ways, you know. And to give you an idea why this was important, when I started helping Gilbert, he had sold to Dr. John Gray at Tulsa. He worked out of the Utica Square Medical Center there in Tulsa. Dr. Gray, 3 horses. And when I started helping Gilbert, do you know how many horses that Dr. John Gray had running in the mountains? 14.
Oh my
They had
God.
multiplied into 14 head because he couldn't catch them. So a doctor in Tulsa had horses running down here, you know, on the old Choctaw land, you know, that the timber companies took away from the native people. And I can tell you that story about how they got it, you know. But Francine's gonna kill me for doing it because she wants that in her book.
Whoever's quickest.
But anyway. Anyway, I got the horses where they'd come to me, and I had to do that by, I'd put corn. I thought, well, they're eating acorns. They love acorns, but they didn't know what feed was. They wouldn't eat sweet feed or anything. So you pour corn down with the acorns, you know, under an oak tree, and they'd nibble at it, but they wasn't doing too much, you know. Then I knew there wasn't many horse apples, Osage orange or hedge apple, bollard, in the mountains because they'd killed all of it out and just had nothing but pines planted back. So I'd get these hedge apples down off our land down at the house and where my Choctaw pasture is down there, and I'd just take a whole pickup load of them to the mountains, and I would put them where I'd put the corn and all. I'd call for the horses, and I'd put it there, and I'd put salt out. They got to come into that salt. They loved that salt because they needed it so bad. They had some natural licks, and I went to places where they had found natural sulfur in the ground, really, and so I got them started eating. Well, then I thought Gilbert was going to be so proud of me, you know, so proud of me for, you know, I went and set a trap up, called the horses. Here they come. They all going to pen. He said, man, I ain't never seen that. I didn't know you could do that, you know. And this one mare, we called her Wild Snowball. She's a Palomino. And she'd run out there and she'd blow and she'd, you know, real loud and throw her tail over her back and run around. And I'd come back to pick up and I'd say, boy, if she'd go and give her, I'd catch her one of these. That doggone thing. He said, well, I think I heard a little sarcasm in that. And I said, well, no. I said, it's just kind of aggravating to me, Gilbert. If I could catch these horses that we need, you know, that you got sold, if we could just get her in and we could get all, you know, if she'd go, we'd get them all, you know. What was that? A bug or something?
I don't know.
Was it that battery charger?
Yeah.
What's it doing there? I mean, did somebody plug it in? Or
Yeah,
oh,
it's a
okay.
battery charger that's supposed to charge up batteries. Maybe it blew them up.
I don't know. But anyway, that let over go off, or was it something else? I thought I saw something.
Something went off.
Yeah. But anyway, it must be a motion that's on that
Oh, it's
left.
flickering, yeah, I see.
But anyway, Gilbert, you know, because you know he could go off on you pretty good, you know. And I'm gonna say some stuff that I don't mean no disrespect to anybody, you know. But he said, well, I'll tell you what now. I said, now you're kind of aggravated at that mare because she won't come in. And I said, well, yeah, it's kind of got me a little bit frustrated because I thought I was going to catch all of them, you know, and all that. Well, now I'll tell you. He's about nearly 80 years old, you know, when he's saying it. Well, now I'll just tell you, This thing makes me think 10 times more of her than them that you've got conned into going into that pen after your sugar. You know, why, if the American Indian had never tasted the goddamn white man's sugar, said they'd have been 10 to 100 times better off. Said if we hadn't never got any of those trinkets and those beads and that silk, said the hell it'd have been 10 times better off. So if that horse won't go in there, that just makes me think 10 times more of that horse. You know. So, I mean, so he was real strong, see, in his convictions like that, see. And did you know, I'm going to jump way over several years now. I really, it come back to me, and I just broke down and cried like a little baby because I had done that to him. When I was catching those horses and was taking them out of the mountains, I knew I was doing it. I was justifying it, saying, okay, they're going to get killed. I know they're going to shoot them if I leave them up there. I know they are. They're already leasing the high echelon hunters out of Oklahoma City and Dallas and places, and they were going to kill them. So I was justifying, in my mind, taking them out and getting them to trust me where they would, where I could do that. And then I had 474, I think, or 75 horses at my house that first winter after I had to start, on 240 acres. And I was about to starve them to death. I appealed to the Choctaw Nation for some feed, some help, you know. And they sent me 10 good big bales of hay, you know. And it was in February. I'd already exhausted. I already maxed out 3 credit cards, and didn't know how I was going to pay them. And you know, they caused me all kind of financial trouble. And anyway, I just didn't know what I was going to do, you know. And then I thought, boy, I'm glad Gilbert is not here to see this, you know. Here I promised them, you know, I got them something just like some of the trusted people that would go amongst the Indians, you know, and talk to them and get them to believe what they wanted them, you know. And I was honest in my thinking with them and all that, and I could see how that could have, how some other people could have done the same things, you know, went and told what they really believed that Washington was going to do. And all that. They really believed it in their hearts and all that, and then they turned around and do whatever they wanted to, you know. And here I got those horses caught like that, and now here I was. They're standing there, every one of them looking at me, a lot worse than out there a while ago. I mean, when you got 400 of them out there looking at you, and you ain't got nothing to give them to eat, you know, and you ain't got no way of getting anything to get them to eat. And that's when a family in Virginia just happened, had to be a godsend deal that this guy called me and said, hey, here y'all are having a bad ice storm down there. I've been keeping up with your horse deal on the internet and all that. I think you're probably in a bind. And I said, I'll tell you the truth. I'm sitting here. I was in that yard over there at that Choctaw pasture, 11 o'clock at night, actually crying, you know. And he called me, you know, just out of the blue. And told me he'd have a check for $10,000 in the mail in the morning, you know, and those are the people that's got the champion horses in Virginia now, you know. They've took them and hired real good trainers and done stuff, and they beat all breeds, you know. They've really been competing in 3-day eventing, driving, and all that kind of stuff, you know, and they just haven't had a chance. It's just like our Thorpe and a lot of Native American ball players and all that. You know, there was a time they never had a chance to go to school, compete, and do things, you know, on that one. And when they did, they excelled, you know. They love everybody, you know, and some of these horses that nobody thinks could do anything have when they had proper training and conditioning and all that. And we proved it with them for endurance, you know. Gilbert got mad at me the same way when I said I don't think a horse can run 50 miles. He got very upset with me. He said he knew these horses could do it. And I said, well, how do you know it, Gilbert? He said, because I know Native Americans. I've got all kind of books and all on it. And he said, they've been a many a day. He said, I've never raced a horse 50 miles, but there's been a many a day I've rode one 50 miles. And I knew he had rode a horse all the way from Oklahoma to Albuquerque, New Mexico. I knew he had done that, you know.
Oh, wow.
And one that these horses go back to, the ones that are not all Choctaw, you know. I told you there's some brought in from the Kiowa, Comanche, and different ones, you know, and some of his original horses like that. But he was born at Hastings, Oklahoma, is in the Chickasaw Nation there, you know, and he said, I know they can. He said that, you know, he had all kind of records and all that on it, and he started showing me these books. And that's the first time I'd ever heard that story about HUGO and about Frank Hopkins and all that kind of stuff, because he had some books that had it in there, Don Worcester, different ones he wrote about. And it told the story how that when he was at Fort Laramie and they brought in some of the Sioux or some of them up there was this boy that his daddy was one of the scouts with Hopkins, came and asked Hopkins if he would buy this little white mare. Said nobody wants her. They're only going to let 3 horses per teepee, and they have to all be 3 females or a gilded, you know, per teepee, per family, I guess is what they meant. And he said nobody would want her because of her size and her color, because she was kind of an off-white and light colored eyes. But he said, this little boy says, but she can carry a full-grown man in a full gallop all day long, you know. And he went and talked to the little boy's daddy, who was another scout, and he said, yeah, that's true. And he asked if one he was going to keep. He said, no, he preferred to keep 3 other ones, you know. And so he went and he finds General Crook and gives him, I think it was 3, it was either 3 or 5 silver dollars for her, you know.
Wow.
And then when they went on the campaign and got Geronimo and some of them out of the Paladura Canyon or something, and they was ordering a lot of those horses to be killed, especially all the stallions to be killed. One of Geronimo's men was riding this horse that this guy said he had been watching all this time. And this is some more of that stuff about talking about facts, you know, and details. It didn't portray that in the movie that it happened this way, but this is the way it came to me, you know. And we already had a stallion in the mountains that Gilbert named Hidalgo because he named it after Hopkins' horse that they made the movie about, that because he thought he was a great 100-mile horse, a great endurance horse, you know, and he gave him to my son. And my son rode him in races and never got him out run, you know, on a 100-mile race, you know. Anyway, Hopkins told Crook or one of them that he wanted that horse, you know, that stallion, you know, so he let him have him. And he was going to cross him on his little Lakota Sioux. That was like a Comanche horse or Apache one, and he crossed him on a Lakota Sioux horse, and the little white mare, and he was calling it his white Y line of endurance horses. And the first baby that she had, he named it Hidalgo, and that was the one that they were supposed to have made the movie about, you know. And now you keep in mind this happened in 1892. Okay, now. And Gilbert was born in 1906, and when he was 9 years old, his uncle gave him his first horse, a little mare called Susie, that was raised out of a Chickasaw mare and a Comanche buffalo horse. And that Comanche buffalo horse won 160 acres for his cousin was riding it, and he had a widowed mother. And he rode this horse called Old Harry. It was a Comanche buffalo horse in the land run and won 160 acres of choice land on that. Gilbert's daddy won 160 acres in the lottery, in the drawing. Gilbert didn't like it because he thought it was a whole lot better to win it in a horse race than it was to get it on the lottery drawing, you know. So he never did like his home deal, but he liked, on his mother's side of the family, they won theirs in the horse race. On his daddy's side, they got it on the lottery. He didn't like it, you know. And but anyhow, they crossed Old Harry and the Chickasaw mare. The Chickasaw mare, they said that they raced her a lot of times on Sundays. They'd drive her to church, in a buggy, and she never was outrun to a buggy. And said as many small kids that could pile on her back could ride her at any time, you know.
My
And
goodness.
now again, all of the people that's done this cloning and blood work and all this stuff on horses, the blood work and the DNA they've done on these horses, they say the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, any of the horses that come out of the South that we have known records of, blood type, basically the same. They say the main difference in the horse is the people that own them. If they're Choctaw, they're Choctaw horses. If they're Chickasaw, they're Chickasaw horses. But more people claim that these are Choctaw horses because they were actually saved here in the Choctaw Nation.
Yeah.
But now there are some Chickasaw families that has helped us that lived here in the mountains. Some they're named Arpaler, married into the Trotter family, and they had some of these horses, you know, and helped along with Gilbert. Gilbert got them helped them get a place in the mountains and get a lease to run their stuff, and they raised horses with Gilbert, you know. But they did bring a little band of paint horses from out west back into here, you know, that they had some of their seed stuff, you know, that from what, you know, way back, you know.
Right.
So, but anyhow, I'm just kind of clarifying or trying to say, you know, now we don't have anything from that old Chickasaw mare of any purity, old Nail, you know, that was the buggy horse, but we do have the blood of Gilbert's first horse, which was Susie, that was out of old Nail and old Harry. We still got that blood in a lot of our horses, not the Choctaw horses, but some of them have more Choctaw blood than anything else. But they still got that little taint of blood of those original horses. It goes back to old Harry was foaled in 1887. Even the quarter horse people don't have that kind of record on their horses,
That's amazing.
you know. But Gilbert would go out amongst the horses in the mountains and take pictures and know which ones ever sprang, what stallions and what mares are together. And they would always have their babies when the winter's pretty much over, because they got on that cycle because they had to do that to survive, because there was nobody there handing them grain to feed to produce extra milk to feed their babies.
Yeah.
So they waited till this time of the year till the grass started coming to start having their babies, where they could get a little bit of lush grass and give them more milk for that baby, you know. So he pretty well knew what times of the year to see what mares was running with what stallions, and usually they were there for life, you know, unless something man-made something separated them, you know.
Right.
And but another thing that they would do is, if a horse really got bad sick, sometimes a stallion would cut that one out from the herd and make her stay away, and the lead mare or the boss mares would make her stay out too. They have to stay the outskirts of the band. They couldn't come into the bunch, or they'd just eat them up, you know. The same way they were doing those two paint mares out there, because they were new. They come in here, well, they'd do the same thing if they were sick, you know.
Oh, really?
They'd run them off, you know.
It's kind
Now
of
there's some people in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, that's got these horses that say that they help each other heal. That they'll on their 80 acres, that when there's one sick, that the stud will bring it into a deal, and they'll all stand there with their heads down, you know, and they're sharing that sickness. Now, I forget what tribe she's with, but he's Cherokee. Her husband is Cherokee, but she's from the California tribe, and she's got some Maya, a little bit of Maya blood in her, you know, Maya. And so that's a little bit different than what we'd saw here in the mountains, you know.
Right.
But and I'm sure that I don't know if that could be the culture or just the different circumstances of where they're at, you know.
Now, how did you?
But anyway, the Hidalgo thing then came up. You know, Gilbert proved to me, showed me these books, that you could have a 50-mile race. And you know, the first thing he said was, well, your brother told me that you don't think I can have a 50-mile race up here without killing horses. That's the first time I met him. You know, he well, ain't you an agriculture man? And I said, well, yes, sir, I am, you know. Well, what do you think of Frank Hopkins? I said, well, I ain't never heard of Frank Hopkins. You're an agriculture man and you ain't never heard of Frank Hopkins? Well, he's the greatest horse endurance rider that ever lives, you know. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I hadn't heard of him, you know. And so he starts telling me the story and showing me these books and telling me how this came about. And after he showed me that they'd had all these races before, horses could do it, he said, I'm satisfied with the right kind of training and all that we can run horses up here in these mountains, and never heard a horse. And he was right. So in 1980, we decided to have our first race. And we had 2 horses that was 2.5 years old, which is unheard of. One of them barefooted, one of them with shoes. The one with no shoes come in first. Boyd Carter, a local guy that lived within a couple of miles of Medicine Springs, was riding him. And the next year, the other one is a 3-year-old, 3.5-year-old, won the race, and nothing come in second. And they'd switch back and forth, you know. And those races was taking about 5 hours. And the races got up to where you could load them good, fast load, the whole deal, not ever stop. We quit doing that because we got worried that we was going to kill a horse, and we'd seen where other people had done it before, you know, and we quit trying to have record times. But Gilbert insisted that, you know, he called it. He wanted to have a hell bent for leather horse race, you know, and he said anybody can trail ride one. You know, said you can ride any kind of a horse 50 miles if you just take your time and take all day about it, and next week too, you know. But he said I'm gonna do it right now, you know. And the horses could do it, you know. And we did it time after time after time, you know.
Wow.
In 1987, we went to Catoosa, at the Port of Catoosa. There, we run down that verdigris navigation system. We run under the Will Rogers Turnpike down that. They advertised, put all the feed stores down here and everything around, said, if you think you're tough, if you think your horses are tough, come and run for $20,000, you know. And
for 50 miles?
They had we didn't know, we thought it was just going to be we had went up there and we raced again them in November, and we won it. My nephew won it. It was 25 miles. Headlines of the Tulsa World, we still got the paper and all that. Boy and his Mustang raced to win $5,000. He's holding his money up, you know, $50, $100 bills, and so then they said, well, in June we're going to have another race, you know, in June, and have a thing called Catoosa Days, and Will Rogers and, you know, Clem McSpadden and them at one time did all of this, you know, and not Clem, but Clem's daddy, Herb McSpadden, and so they were going to do it again, you know, and try to get something going, you know. And I told this guy, I said, if y'all run that race in June like you run the race today here in, you know, in November, I said, you're going to hurt horses. And so he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I can't do it in that heat, you know, and all that, you know. And so anyhow, when we got up there, it was $100 entry fee. And we hadn't run for money before that. We just run here in the mountains and nowhere else. And we did it that November and won that $5,000. Now in June we went back. And come to find out, it was a 15-mile race, a 25-mile race, a 50-mile race, and a 100-mile race. And they started the 100-mile horses out at like 6 in the morning, you know, before daylight, going down that navigation system. Had it ribboned off, you know, and give each one of them a flashlight, you know, where they could see where how to go. And then they waited like an hour, and then they let the 50-mile horses go. And then they waited like I think about 15 minutes, and they let the 25-mile horses go, and they waited another 15 minutes, and let the 15-mile horses go. I had my daughter and my nephew riding in the 15-mile race. I had a sister-in-law riding in the 50-mile race. I had a niece and a nephew riding in the 25-mile race, and my son in the 100-mile race. And he was the only one that finished the 100-mile race, 15 hours and 44 minutes that day.
Wow.
It was 110-degree heat, 92% humidity.
Oh,
The 50-mile horse won that race. He did it in 3 hours and 10 minutes, 50 miles.
Night.
And
Wow.
and loped the whole deal, you know, and the only one that done it. And then the 25-mile race, it took them 1 hour and 5 minutes. We come in first and second, 1 hour and 5 minutes. And you put that in perspective, you know, it was like if you're running halfway from McAllister to Antlers, you know, that, you know,
Right.
or something like that. That's pretty good,
That's
good deal.
impressive.
1 hour and 5 minutes, and in that kind of heat. And then the 15-mile race, my daughter was riding our very best horse, when my son had won more on than any of them. And my nephew was riding my dad's best horse, and they didn't come back. You know, they didn't. What they was doing, you'd go 12.5 miles down that navigation system. You'd have to cross Bird Creek, Dog Creek, some of them to make us turn around and come back, you know. And on the 100-mile, you had to do that. You had to go to that point down there to make sure you went the full distance and then come back. And on the 100-mile race, you had to do that 4 times, you know, that day. Well, when he come back in, he said, "Dad, there's dead horses. People are killing their horses all up down that deal, you know." And I said, "What do you mean?" You know, he said, "Well, they're just running them too hard. They're riding them too hard." And he's like 13, 14 years old, you know, and he's telling me that. And I said, "Well, did you see sister and them?" "No, I didn't see her, you know." And so when he went back, he seen her. And I took off walking looking for her because I knew she should have come back quick. You know, 15 miles, you know, I knew in 40 minutes she'd be back, you know.
Right.
And what she done, she stopped and was helping a girl named Jody Trotter that she had 2 horses in the race, and she killed both of her horses. A grown woman, you know. And they were saying that the kids didn't know how to, you know, the kids needed to have an adult sponsor, you know. And I'd say, age don't make a horseman, you know. It's your experience is what makes a horseman. It's not age, you know.
Right.
You take a 30 or 40-year-old man that's never been on a horse before, and then he learns how to ride. You can't expect him to ride as good as a 16-year-old that's been riding every day of their life, you know, or since he's 3 years old, you know. But anyway, there was a lot of those guys that had to do. Nobody do prison time, but lots of them had to do as much as 500 hours of community service for abusing their horses and stuff on that deal, you know. That Rogers County knew of like 17 horses that people killed. We knew of more than that. And we didn't hurt any of ours. And we had a vet. This is another deal where I was telling you about the prejudices. George, get you a chair.
Well,
Some chairs over there.
I'm thinking about one that mixing that coffee up, try to cook it.
All right, we left them pieces in the bag for more than my pickup.
Cake mixers.
Huh?
Them cake mixers.
Yeah. Now don't tell them all your secret ingredients are.
Pete, write that down.
I thought you done that by hand. I thought you was out there mixing it up by scratch. Yeah. Well, you done went out there and shut my barn door, didn't you?
Yep.
Yeah.
I went out there just for the hard rain. It rained pretty hard. I put my
Yeah.
sweater on and walked out there, and I stayed out there and it quit raining. Either that or I might go cut some more wood, try to get.
Hey, Pete, we're going to take a quick break. We're about out of
Okay.
camera. We're going to download and then take 10, and we'll be back.